Hey guys, this is Carrie, and today we're going to be working on our first project of the new semester. And what we're going to be creating are these two apps here, All of the Lights and All of the Lights 2. So these are basically like a set of LEDs, and when you click them here, it will light them up, which I think is pretty cool. And then here we've got this sort of like LED random effect that might be cool for like, I don't know, some sort of special effect in like a sci-fi movie or like a screensaver or something like that. Or maybe if you did like the lights at a concert, maybe it would be cool to be able to have them like randomly turn on, like kind of in this format. So let's see. What we're going to be doing to start today is we'll get our whole code station set up. So I've got my cheat sheet ready to go. We're going to be giving you some starter code today. So in order for you to code it, after I share this link with you, what you're going to do is you're going to create your own copy by forking it. So we'll go here and we'll fork it. Now when you click that, it creates your own copy of it. So you should see your name here, and you can change the name of it. So for me, I don't want to call it All of the Lights Starter 1. I'm going to call this All of the Lights Video because I'm making it in the video. You could just call it All of the Lights. Now, having starter code is a common occurrence that you might encounter in the computer science field because you might be taking over somebody else's job. You might be hired to replace them, and you'd have to be able to read through their code and edit it. You might also be working on a project with a designer who might design some of the features, and then you would have to come in and program it. So this is not like an inauthentic example. But let's take a look at what's happening here with the code, because I think that's always a good step when you're trying to understand somebody else's code. So I'm going to load it up in a separate window. I'm going to try clicking around. I notice that nothing happens. So what it looks like we've got here is it looks like we've got some HTML and CSS without the JavaScript functionality. So let's take a look at that. All right, so looking through the HTML file, we've got kind of the standard stuff in the header. And then once we get to the body, we've got a div called content. And that div doesn't end, right? Because you would see an ending tag right away if it did end. So then inside of that div, we've got a ton of these smaller divs that are called lights. They have a class of light, so that makes them special. It looks like we've got a lot of them. Maybe this is why you have starter code today, so that you can have to copy and paste all of these. But I did. And then you have a closing tag here. So this is where your content div closes. So you've got a content div with a whole bunch of lights inside of it. And then at the very end, you've got your JavaScript file linked, and this is where we're going to be putting the functionality. Let's take a look in there. All right, so the JavaScript file is empty. That makes sense because it didn't have any functionality. In fact, counting here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 squared means that we have 256 lights here. That's a lot of copying and pasting. The next thing to look at is the style. So here we go. With the style, we've got the body being styled with this shade of gray. So the body is the entire page. That makes sense. Then we've got that content div. Remember it had a class of content? This one right here. So we use .content to select it. And that's, oh, that makes sense too. It's a grid that's 16 by 16. I didn't even have to count it. With a gap of 5 pixels between. Say this is like a 5 pixel gap. That's background is this whitish color. We can see that here between the tiles. The width is that. The padding is 5 pixels. So the space inside between the border and the elements inside matches the gap here. That's cool. The margin is auto, and margin is space outside of the content element. So this space here is auto-calibrated so that it's centered even if you resize it. It's got a border radius. You can see that here, like a very fine border radius. And then for the lights, these are those 256 divs here. So we say select everything with a class, because it's dot, a class of light. Give it a background of dark gray, height and width of 30 pixels. So these are 30 by 30 pixel little squares. This is a new property that we'll talk about in a second. And then the border radius of these is also 2 pixels, so they are slightly rounded. So what transition means is you can see that if you look at this one, those lights transition from being turned off, gray, to being lit up, pink. And as they transition, it's not like it doesn't turn solid pink right away, right? Look at that. When you click it, it lights up kind of slowly. It like turns on, like almost like it has a dimmer switch. And that's a transition here. So what this property says is any transition, any change in style, and the reason why it's any is the word all here, is going to take 1 second, and it's going to ease from its starting state to its closing state. So we haven't worked with this before, but you'll probably see this a lot for animation style things. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to define another class, and that class is going to be the lit up class. So when a light is lit, what we're going to say is the background of that light, let's make it pink. So let's just test this out. I'm going to go to my HTML, and I'm going to make the first light now lit. So the way that we can do that is because this style comes with the property, comes with the class lit. We just have to add the class lit here. So this now has the class light and it's lit. So if we reload our document here, we now should see that that cell is lit up. If we want to light up the fifth one, we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can add the class lit here. And now when we refresh it, the fifth one will be lit as well. The reason why, and there's actually a little technicality here, right? Light and lit both provide backgrounds. Here the background is dark gray. Here the background is pink. So I might wonder, if this has a class of light and lit, why does it come out pink in the end? And the reason why is in the style sheet, because this style comes after, it will override this style. So make sure that you have lit after light. So these properties, whenever you give something a class of lit, it will get those properties. So now the second one will also be lit. Okay, so this is like the template kind of for our idea. And I might go back and edit this. But let's see what we need to do in our JavaScript to make it so that somebody can interact with this without looking at the code. So the first thing that we're going to be doing in JavaScript usually is selecting the elements that we're going to interact with. So this is a comment to myself, just sort of we always start our JavaScript files this way. Now thinking about this, I want to interact with all of the lights. And I could select each of them individually, but that would be 256 selector lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of something that we used in rock, paper, scissors, and I said it was going to be in unit the next semester, so here we go. Let lights equal document.querySelector. And a lot of people made this mistake in rock, paper, scissors, and they ended up having a hard time fixing it. We're not going to use the regular query selector. If you see here, we also have the option to do something called query selector all. And what this will do is it will select all of the things that match whatever selector we put here. So make sure that you have the all word here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select all of things with the class of light. So the reason why this is lights is because we're selecting not just one thing, but all of the lights. All of the lights. All right, and then what we can do maybe is let's just do a console.log the lights. And let's make sure that we get the same thing. So I'm going to refresh this page. And to see the JavaScript console, we'll go View, Developer, JavaScript console. And what should come up is something called a node list with 256 elements. And if you click this little arrow, you can actually look inside of that list and you can see all of these divs. And as you highlight over them, you can see that all of them have been selected. All right, so if you didn't get this, you know you have an error in your code here, so pause, fix it, ask Carrie for help. All right, so now what we want to do is we don't want to just see this node list. We're going to be talking a lot in this unit about how do you, and this is one of the benefits of working with computers, How do you make use of the fact that a computer is smart enough to go through this and for each of these things add the same exact functionality? So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a type of loop called a for each loop. To add the same functionality to each of the lights. So the way that we set this up is we say, okay, well, we selected all of the lights. Now we want to go through and do the same thing for each of them. So we go lights dot for each, and this is going to be something that I probably add to the cheat sheet, but I haven't added it yet. And the way you set up a for each loop here is you say, okay, as we go through each of them, the first one, I'm going to call that my light, and I'm going to do something to it. I'm going to do something to that light. Then I'm going to call this one my light, and I'm going to do the same thing to this light. And then I'm going to call this one my light, and I'm going to do the same thing to this light. So the word that you're going to use to refer to each of them goes in parentheses here. So I'm going to take the light, and what I'm going to do to it is I'm just going to say light, or let's just do a console.log the light. And I'm kind of worried because I'm not seeing it change colors. Maybe I've made a mistake here. Let's see what happens. So now when I refresh it, I do have an error. I'm missing an argument. Oh, I'm a dope. Sorry, I formatted this wrong. All right, so what we're going to do here is take each light, and then we have to set up a code block. So I forgot the code block. So this parenthesis matches this one. This matches this one. And then inside of the code block, what we're going to do is we're going to do a console.log the light. All right, my brain is still on vacation. Let's see if this works now. All right, cool. So now what we can see here is it went through each of the lights and it logged that light. So it started with the first one, then the second, then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth. So it goes through each of them. And the temporary name for them is it calls the one that we're currently on light. So this is light, then this is light, then this is light, then this is light. All right, but what we actually want to do is we don't want to console.log these. Let's create this one first. So the way that this one works is each light has its own event listener. And when it's clicked, it gives it that background where it's lit up. So here's what we'll do. We'll say whatever light you're currently up to, give that light an add event listener. That add event listener is going to be a click event. Sorry, I really forgot how to code JavaScript. You should only have one set of parentheses so far. It should be a click event. And then the function that we're going to be adding to that will be everything inside of this code block. So what we'll say is when it's clicked, we'll go to that, oop, this is not the right one. When it's clicked, we'll go to that light, and we'll go to the class list of that light, which is this list of class right here, and we'll add to that the class lit. So we're going through all of our lights, and for each one of them, we're going to take the light that we're currently up to. And this arrow says what we do to that light is this whole code block. Give that light an event listener of click, and then when it's clicked, make it lit by adding lit to its class list. So here we go. Let me shrink this down. I'll refresh it. Okay, these three are lit up because they already have the class of lit from that HTML. But now if I click this one, oh, nothing happens. I have an error. Wow, bad programmer this morning. Light.add event lister. That's not how you spell listener. All right, I think, there we go. Now I've spelled it correct. Let me refresh it. All right, so you can see that now when we click them, these also get a class of lit to match the ones that already had it. And this is cool. This program is looking pretty complete, but you'll notice there's no way to turn off the lights. So what we're going to do is we're going to make one change, and then we'll be done with this one here, which is instead of just adding this class, let's toggle it. And what that will do is, if the element already has the class of lit, when we toggle it, it will turn it off. And if it doesn't have this class, it will add lit to the class list. So here we go. With toggle instead of add, here when we turn one on that hasn't been on before, it adds the class. And then if you turn it off, you can see it goes back to normal because it toggles it off and on. All right, so this is pretty cool. And you can see that that ease, that transition, looks really good here because it steadily turns them on instead of turning them dramatically. Oh, sorry, this is the one that we're working on. Instead of turning it off automatically. And if I go to one of the ones that started on and I click it, it will toggle that class list off and on. So this is actually kind of interesting to look at, I think, if we investigate the HTML. So let's click this thing here, this button. And I'm going to select an element on the page, which is this one right here. If I look at the HTML, I can see that currently the class list includes light and lit. But now if we click it, notice that it loses that class lit. And if we click it again, it gains that class lit. Because what happens is when we click it, it toggles it off and on. This one also, same thing. So that's what's happening sort of behind the scenes. This is a copy of our HTML code that's being actively edited because our JavaScript edits the class list, which is this thing right here. All right, so now let's look at making the sort of LED effect random version of this. So I actually like this code enough to keep a copy of it for myself. I kind of like the clicking thing. It seems cool. You can make like a nice pattern. It's kind of like a light bright, which was an old toy from the 80s or 90s that I grew up with, where you just turned on lights to make designs. But this one is even cooler to me because it has that random quality where it's being lit up in a variety of ways. So here you go. If you like this one, what you can do is you can copy it and you can fork it. So maybe I'll call this all of the lights video 2. Or you could keep editing in the same file if you didn't like this one that much. I'm going to close this one out so that I don't get confused. This should be exactly the same thing, including the JavaScript that we just programmed. And now what we want to think about is, well, actually what I should think about first is getting set up here. I want to load my code. And what I want to think about is what do I need to change basically in order for it to be this random one. And the thing that I need to change is I need to use randomness. Whenever we use randomness to turn things off or on, it sort of reminds me about that Magic 8-Ball project that we did, where we had those random things where it was numbers became effects. And what we need to do that is we need to take this function that I wrote from the cheat sheet, and we need to add this. Let me just get the comment with it. We need to add this to the start of our code. So if we want to use this function later on, we'll say, okay, well, here you go. Computer, I'm going to teach you how to create a random number function. This is going to generate a random number from whatever the min number is to the max number. So for each of the lights, what we want to do is, and I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to go to my old code, take a look at it. We got our generate random function here. For each of these things, oh, this is the wrong one. What we want to do is we want to, oh man, I used some stuff that I thought I did. This is what I was worried about. I used some stuff that I haven't taught you guys yet, but I'll show you in this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up an interval. And what this will do is it will be something that repeats over time, an interval. Every interval of time that goes by, we're going to run some function. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that function here, create our code block, and that's set up nice. So each light is going to get its own interval. And let's say that we want that light to run, or we want this interval to run every second. So each light flips or doesn't flip every second. We add the number 1000 here. Because the way set interval works, if I click inside here, well, why was it letting me do that? If I click set interval here, you can see that the second argument is a number, and that number is going to be the number of milliseconds that you wait. So 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. So for each of the lights, they now have their own interval. And this is going to run every second. So every second what we want to do is we want to generate a random number. So let's let that number equal generate random. And I'm going to say either from 0 to 1. So this is going to be either a 0 or a 1. And if that number is a 0, we're going to do nothing. So I'm not even going to code that. But if that number is a 1, then we want to do in this code block, we want to toggle the class here. So we'll say light dot class list dot toggle the lit class. So every 1 second, we're going to generate a random number from 0 to 1. It's either going to be a 0 or a 1. If that number is a 1, then we'll flip the class list from off to on or on to off, and that will run every second. So let's see what happens here. All right, I got an error. Sweet. Unexpected token. I don't know why I wrote this there. Hopefully that's the only thing that I put there. Okay, missing that after the argument list. All right, so let's see. We've got the light. This thing goes here. All right, my set this goes here. This goes here. This goes here. This goes here. Oh, when I typed that other one up there, it seems to have created an extra one there as well. And all right, so this is that, that's that, and now everything is matched up. Sorry for the error. All right, cool. So here we go. So every 1 second, it's toggling those. And it seems like 1 second might have been too much time because it creates this very like static do, 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 do flip. And I kind of like that transition to look more amorphous. So what we can do is we can reduce the time here to every half a second and see how that looks instead. That's still a little static for me. Maybe what we could do is we could do every quarter second, so every 250 milliseconds. Still feels a little static. So last year, it looks like I'm going to cheat. It looks like I did every 10th of a second, so every 100 milliseconds. And this really has a feeling of being very random to me and not having everything sort of change all at the same time. Last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete the ones that started off lit because I don't need that anymore. And for me, this is my final project, and I like how it came out. Oh, was one of them starting off lit? No. Okay. Sorry for all the errors in today's lesson. Some of those were a little bit tricky to fix. My fault. But maybe it shows kind of like some of the things that I use with fixing errors. And the fact that when you program, you're bound to make errors, even if you've been doing it for 5 years like I have or something. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this project. You should edit the CSS to make it look way better than this, because it's a really cool project that doesn't look great because Carrie chose just pink. You could choose a better color. All right, see you tomorrow.